thank you very much, everybody, for coming to my talk. I hope you have as much fun listening as I have had in creating this and planning this. So thank you very much. Just so everyone is aware, this is not your traditional Derbycon talk. This is a food hacking talk. I'm sorry if I tricked you. That being said, I came to Derbycon rather late in its life, and it has done so much for me personally as well as professionally. And for that, I want to say thank you to Hacking Dave and the entire Derbycon team. So, who am I? My name is Micah K Brown, and I volunteer as the Vice President for the Greater Cincinnati ISSA chapter. I've also started talking at many local and regional talks. Any talk that I make is going to be free and open source, and I'll post it right there on my GitHub. On top of that, I successfully held a rogue hacker-style meetup in which I gave away 45 pounds of pulled pork yesterday. That I cooked from my hotel room. And I'm going to tell you how. So, real quick plug. In Cincinnati, we have a lot of great IT and IT security groups that just service our community. 4 of us have a real tight alliance. We don't care which groups that you are a member of or support, just that you find the groups that make your personal and your professional life just a bit easier. If you're ever in Cincinnati, I'd love to have you, any or all of us. Pretty much we have a representation today from all of these groups here. So, if you're ever in town, come check us out. So you might think, why cook in your hotel room? Well, quite frankly, cooking is fun. And when you're the chef, you can make exactly what you want. And I've recently been doing a lot more of these types of events, traveling to conferences in my career. And when you travel, a lot of it I have to do on my personal dime, as I'm sure many of you guys have to do. And there are fixed costs, such as travel, such as hotels, such as the conference talk. Where I can make my dollar stretch a little bit more is actually going through in with my food budget. And finally, because we're hackers and we love to do crazy things with technology. So, how did I find myself speaking in front of all of you? And thank you for taking time out. This makes me so happy. It all goes back to Circle City Con. You see, Circle City Con was the first hacker-style conference that I was invited to speak at. And I gave my Star Wars data governance talk. And I was thinking, I've got a lot of guys that are going to be there, and I want to do something special and just really celebrate the community that we have in Cincinnati. And I thought, well, I could take everyone out to dinner, but downtown Indianapolis gets pretty pricey pretty quick. And then I thought, well, everyone likes my barbecue. Maybe I could just do a pork butt. And I thought, well, you know what? There's going to be too much left over. So I called my good friend Matt. He runs the Cincinnati Simpa Sig. He has been my personal speaking mentor. Our friendship really grew at my first Derbycon, Derbycon 7, the Derbycon that birthed Trevor into this world. Touche. But it's because of Matt giving me support and a little bit of a push that I've been able to do some of the coolest things that I've done in the past 2 years. So thank you. So I called Matt. I said, Matt, I've got a crazy idea. And Matt said, I'm listening. He said, how about we go through and at Circle City Con, we hold a rogue meetup to promote our groups. He's like, yeah, but how are you going to get people to come? I said, Matt, you don't understand. MEAT-UP. And he laughed maniacally and said, I'll be glad to chip in. And I don't know how it started, but as we were setting up, we were just riffing with each other. What would a talk like, or what would a CFP for this style of talk look like? And Matt made me promise that I'd submit it to Derby. And guys, that's how I got invited to come here and present to you. So first, let's talk a little bit about smoking, but I had a good conversation with Hacking Dave, and he insists that we talk a little bit about safety. Never leave your smoker unattended while it's working. Always have tools to put your fire out in case something were to happen. Wash your hands before and after you touch any type of proteins. Clean and protect your surfaces. Gloves are your friend, and one of the easiest ways to level up your food game is simply to buy high-quality meat probes. Other than that, have fun, be adventurous. So when we're doing a hot smoke, we usually want to cook between 225 and 275. And regardless what type of smoker you use, whether it's a side loader, a pellet, a Komodo, an electric, you really only have to control just 3 things to control your smoker: the fuel, the heat, and the oxygen. If you take away any one of those components, you're going to extinguish your fire. Now, unfortunately, I have not found a safe method to use a hot smoker in a hotel room. So what I'm going to show you how to build is a cold smoker. And I actually brought a prototype of my cold smoker down here. After this talk, I'll be out there if you want to take a look at it. And whereas a hot smoker is designed to go through and to cook food while you're smoking, a cold smoker imparts delicious smoke flavor while not directly cooking it. So you will need a more traditional cooking surface to go through and finish your cook. But once again, these can be made very cheap, very easily, about $10, and you probably have most of the parts in your home at this point in time already. But with that being said, the first thing that we need to do is we need our fuel source. So I generally use wood pellet chips, about $10 a box. You just need a handful. And you can go through and you can wrap a nice, thin aluminum wood pellet cigar. And then what I always do is I rip off the top end, I pour some chips out, I put in an all-natural fire starter, and then I put some more chips or pellets right on top of that. I then will use something like a pen or a knife or a pencil, and I'll put a copious amount of holes in it to make sure that the air can go through, because the only thing that actual little wood pellet cigar is supposed to do is to try to hold the chips together. In fact, you can actually make something much like this if you want to continue using it. Now, this type of a smoker is going to be perfect for if you're going to a cookout, a tailgate, if you're going to a park. This is a great little smoker. The next thing is we need to work on our tins. So I always like on the bottom right to put a 1-inch by 1-inch hole. And when I cut these holes out, I only cut 3 sides. That gives me a little flap that I can go and use to control how much oxygen is going into the smoker and out of. And then on the top part, on the top left, I go through and I put another 1-inch by 1-inch hole. And that being said, I just go through and I use little metal paper clips to go through and to secure the top and the bottom to each other. Inside, no secret here. I just have that little wood pellet cigar that we went through and shaped. I put the food in there. Generally, for a nice, light, smoky flavor, you're looking for about 15 minutes. If you want to go through and be a little bit more adventurous, a little more bold, you can go through and leave it in there for 30 minutes. One thing that this is also good for is like cheeses, or if any of you like old fashions, wait till you try a smoked old fashioned. It is delectable, I guarantee. But that being said, when you're working with this type of smoker, you're really controlling everything by how much oxygen is getting into the smoker. If you have too much oxygen, all of the wood pellets are going to go through and ignite, and you're going to have a little bit of a fire inside. Too little, your pellets are going to go out. So this is where you're going to have to go through, play, and experience is going to be your best teacher. You can notice that in this picture, I've actually gone through and raised it up about 4 to 6 inches using whatever's necessary. That just helps me protect the surface. And as you can see, it does a darn good job. So let's talk about how I pulled off my meetup here at Derby. Well, I had some help. So with the help of my friends, I was able to serve 45 pounds of pulled pork, 2 steak dinners, and 1 chicken dinner. We gave out 130 lunches at a total price point of $150. How did I do it? I used the new cooking technique called sous-vide. It's roughly translated from French to under vacuum. And this is something that's really come a long way in popularity in the past couple years, especially with the IoT revolution. With sous-vide cooking, what you actually do is you place your food in a pouch and or a glass container, if it's more of a liquid or gel, and you submerge it in water. The actual sous-vide device will go through and hold the temperature of the water at a very, very, very precise temperature. Now, because you're cooking at lower temperatures with this technique, your cook times are going to be a little bit longer, but it's also very predictable and very forgiving. Now, when you're going through and cooking traditional meats on traditional surfaces, if you're trying to get that perfect medium rare on a steak, you have a very short, safe window to take that actual steak off of the grill. If you take it off too soon, not cooked enough. Take it off too late, well, it's going to be a little bit on the dry side. With sous vide, as the meat, the proteins are going through and cooking, they're naturally going to sweat. It just happens. Traditional cooking surfaces, you lose that flavor. But since the food's in its own little pouch, you reserve it. And so your food, your steak, your chicken, your ribs are taking a nice little sauna within its little container, and it makes your meat absolutely moist, delectable, and with something like ribs, you're going to get hyperextension of the meat off of the bone, sometimes up to 2 to 3 inches, which is great. Now, another benefit of sous vide cooking is it's very mathematical. It's very predictable. It's also very forgiving. So if I cook a steak, which will take about 1 hour, once the 1 hour mark comes up, I have 30 additional minutes to take it out of its little sauna before it goes into an unsafe zone, which means that if life happens, that's cool. Just deal with it and get back to your cooking when you're ready. I also find this technique to be very good when I'm making vast amounts of barbecue. There's a couple times where at home I've actually served at the local ISSA group, and it's been great. Now, one thing you do have to realize is with this methodology, certain foods work better with an extra sear on it. Not only is it visually appealing, but it also gives the meat, the dish, that little something extra. So I'll show you how to do that too. So your first decision is if you want to try it out. Do you want to try? Do you want to buy? Or do you want to build? If you want to go through and just try this methodology out, what I tell people all the time is take a pan that you already use, take an actual thermometer, go through and very slowly bring and hold the water to your desired temperature for about 15 minutes before you actually start your cook. Then just do a standard sous vide cook, take it out, and you're going to be fine. Recently, the sous vide immersion cookers have come down drastically in price, as well as there is 2 links here that actually will show you how to build one using a Raspberry Pi, and that one is pretty awesome. So guys, this is how I cooked my food. I had 2 cook stations. I had one set at 145 for the pulled pork and the chicken. I had another one set up at,
Speaking of warm liquids.
This is so sweet.
You are the last Derbycon speaker to be iced ever. Right?
You know, I think I'm going to start drinking them all this way. I think we need to call this Kennedy style. So one thing that I say when I introduce people to sous vide cooking is don't be afraid to go through and to pack in the flavor, my friends. And why is that? Well, I already told you. As the meat naturally comes up, it's going to go through, it's going to sweat. And as it goes through and as it sweat, some of the rub is going to fall off. Now, it's not lost because remember, it's still in that little pouch. It's dissolved and it's going to naturally work its way deeply into the actual meat, and it is going to be delectable. Now, when you're cooking sous vide, you have an option where you can go through and you can use a vacuum seal bag. That's the preferred because remember, the more air in the bag, that's going to add as an insulator, too much air, and you're not going to have a good time. When it comes to using a commercial single-use zipper bag, what I always suggest is place the food in there, work as much air as you can out of it, then go through and zip it up about 75% of the way, submerge most of the bag underneath the water. The water's naturally going to help force more air out, work the rest of the air out, go through, finish closing it, remove the bag from the water, bring the water up to temperature. When we're talking about chicken, it's a much higher cook rate. So it's 140 to 176 degrees. Now, the actual temperature, it's going to vary based on the type of meat, whether it's fresh or frozen, as well as the thickness of it. So there's plenty of resources online. This has become very popular the past couple years, and all of the information is out there. Personally, I like about $1.49 for a chicken breast that is not frozen and about 1 inch thick. Now, it might go in 1 inch thick, but they usually come out like over 2 inches thick. They are absolutely delectable. And it will cook in about an hour. Once it's done, chicken's one of those proteins that really benefits from a good sear. So what I'd go through and what I do is at home, I'll use a hot pan with a little bit of oil, hit it 30, 45 seconds per side, and you're going to have a good day. If you go through and if you are not at home, there are special adapters that can fit onto small propane tanks that are used for portable grills, and those actually work really well. Not only are they fun to play with, but they really give you a real nice sear. And finally, what I used, because I was a hacker and I was living off of the hotel, I wrapped the chicken in aluminum foil and I used the iron for about a minute per side. I kid you not.
And the cotton setting?
On the highest setting I could. Okay. I juiced it up. Now, guys, I don't know about you, but I love myself a good steak. And when it comes to steaks, I'm much more of a traditionalist. I like salt, I like pepper, and I added a little bit of rosemary just for the wow factor. I wanted to have a couple of proteins that were available for people that might not eat pork for one reason or another, and I'm glad I added a chicken option and a steak option. But just like with the chicken, I put it in a vacuum sealed bag, and I froze it. Everything that I brought was frozen, and I kept it in coolers under ice the entire time until it was ready for me to go through and to cook. With steaks, you have a much lower cook temperature. So your cook temperature for steaks is going to be about 122 to 154. Now me, I like a good medium rare steak, and I found for about an inch thick fresh steak, it'll cook in about an hour at 129. Once it comes out, you can use one of those 3 methodologies to go through and to actually put a nice sear. This time, I used the iron methodology again. I didn't want to push things too far by using my propane tank attachment tool. Now for the star and what I got people raving about, my Lynchburg style pulled pork. Now, I picked up 4 pork butts, and when I'm smoking, I chose to use my electric. I'm still learning how to use my Komodo, just like switching from one sim to another. You kind of have to learn your tools, your techniques, and your tactics. Same is true with smokers, my friend. But with that being said, I usually allocate at 225 a nice low and slow 90 minutes per pound. Now, because I was doing so many at the same time, it actually ended up being closer to 110 minutes per pound of the largest butt. Now, immediately after I went through and I opened each of the pork butts, I patted them down dry. And I wanted to, this is Derbycon. If I'm going to go big, right? So I wanted to add that extra wow factor. So I took about 8 ounces of molasses and I cut it with some soy sauce and just hand mixed it. The molasses in and of itself is so thick that it would go through and block the smoke from deeply penetrating, which is why I wanted to go through and I wanted to cut it a little bit. I got it just so it was about the viscosity of water. And then I just simply hand rubbed each of those pork butts, which is why down in the lower left hand you can see that they have a beautiful golden color. Now, this is going to do a couple things. The first thing that it's going to do is as it smokes, it's going to caramelize and it's going to be very delectable. The second, it actually allows me to pack on more of the rub as possible. And because of I'm packing more and more rub on, that is actually going through and meaning that I'm going to have an absolutely fantastic bark or crust, depending on which school of barbecue you are coming from. Now, when it comes to cooking a good pork butt, you need to go through and you need to shoot for a key internal temperature of somewhere between 195 and the mid 200s. Personally, I try to split it at 198. You can see that I have some nice temperature probes in each one of the butts so I can understand how they are each going through and working. Each pork butt, each piece of meat that you cook is going to behave slightly differently. So I did definitely go through and leveled up my game when I went through and upgraded to having multiple multiple good high-quality sensors. Once each pork butt came up to 198, I took just a normal baking pan. I removed the pork butt from the smoker, and I took it inside and just let it rest for about 90 minutes. Now this, guys, is where the fun kicks in. There is no wrong way to go through and to pull a pork butt. There are many ways that you can do it. Some people like to use tongs. Some people like to use forks. I would assert that the most fun way is to go through and use barbecue knuckles. It's kind of fun. You put them on and you feel like Wolverine if instead of fighting villains, you're actually going through and, making barbecue. And so what I do is I'll then take the pork butt over to my prep station, and I've got a separate pan that's just for pulling. I'll scoop out about 1/6 of the actual pork butt. I'll put it in the pulling station. I'll use my left claw to hold the meat directly up against the wall, and I'll come in, down, and out with my right claw several times until it's all pulled. If I go through and I'm not happy with how it pulled, I'll rake it back up into the center, rotate it 90 degrees, and repeat. At that point, I then went through and I used vacuum-sealed bags and I put it directly into the freezer. So when it came time on Friday, before I went to lunch, I went through and I filled my giant fill station, and I brought it up to temp 140. I started out with as hot of water as I could get out of the shower, and it took about 30 minutes for all of that water to come up to temperature. And I went through and I simply put the meat in, and I walked away. Now, at that point, every 3 or 4 hours, I'd come back to the hotel room and I'd top off the bath because, let me tell you, my container was almost not big enough to go through and to cook all of the pork. But at the end of the day, I successfully served 45 pounds of pulled pork, 2 steak dinners, 1 chicken dinner. And I want to go through, say thank you for all being part of this. Hopefully you've had as much fun listening to this as I have in going through and putting this together, as well as please keep in mind all of these slides are freely available at GitHub/Micah K Brown. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your conference.